Hello everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy Monday. So as per usual, I have some ghost stories here for you today, sent in by you. If you have any ghost stories, paranormal experiences, just weird stories, it doesn't have to be like scary ghosts, it could be scary people. Go ahead and send them right here to this email address and I'll read them out here on a Monday. What have we got to do today? Not much housekeeping. If you haven't joined me here on a Monday before, I basically read out ghost stories that my subscribers send to me and I create a look kind of based on a way to die or a kind of ghost, as morbid as that sounds. And I very much got inspired to do this by Bailey Sarian, who does Murder Mystery Makeup Mondays, where she mixes true crime and makeup and creates like an incredible look. So I was inspired to mix something that I love, which is a paranormal, horror and ghost stories, and do makeup as well. And of course, the majority of you know exactly who Bailey Sarian is, but I will leave a link below to her channel. Okay, let's get into it. Today I was thinking kind of like bridal. So I was having my wedding, I had a nice kind of basic bridal look going on, and then, you know, sometimes people just die at their weddings, so that's our situation. I'm looking very shiny and greasy today. Very shiny and greasy. I will leave all the links to products that I use below, but I never really talk about when I'm reading because I feel like it distracts and takes away from the stories. Okay, so our first story today is called Talking to Pictures. It says, hey Robert, I really love your videos, especially the ghost stories, even though I get scared very easily. Getting scared is fun, it's a nice feeling. I wanted to share my ghost story, even though it's not quite a ghost story and not that scary either. My grandpa died of cancer when I was about 9 years old. We are from Russia, but I live in Germany, so we were not able to attend his funeral. We moved to another city a few years ago, and my mum hung up pictures of my grandpa in the living room. Sometimes when I'm bored, I go into the living room and sing to the pictures of my grandpa, or just tell him what happened in the last few weeks. I always have very crazy and vivid dreams, and a couple of nights after I sang in the living room, I had a particularly weird dream. And in the middle of that dream, I found myself in an open space. And there was my grandpa, just sitting there smiling at me. I ran into his arms and he hugged me and just said, I am so proud of you, over and over again. Even though this may not be very scary or an actual ghost story, it made me very happy. And I hope that it makes you happy too. Have a wonderful day. That's so cute. How do we feel about past relatives coming to visit you in dreams? Do we think that's a thing? I've had so many stories, and I think we've had stories on here where people are either like told things in their dreams, or they're like visited by someone in their dreams, or they've had a dream about someone who has passed away that night and they didn't know they passed away. I love those kind of stories. It kind of gives you a bit of clarification, you know, like they're fine. Okay, our next story is called A Haunting in 4 Parts. It's a lot of parts. Okay. So it says, hi Robert, I recently found your channel and I'm obsessed. Thank you. I really look forward to the ghost stories on Mondays. Part 1. Ooh. When I was 19, I had a 4-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. I also had a 1-year-old daughter. One night, I was home alone with my daughter. I had put her to bed around 8:30, 9 p.m. and went to take a bath. Closet was on the other side of the bathroom wall. Like the wall, the sink and the mirror were on. I had gotten into the bath and started to relax when there was a loud bang behind the bathroom mirror above the sink, which meant it was coming from my bedroom closet. It was such a hard bang, it actually shook the mirror. I got out of the bath, wrapped myself in a towel, went to my kitchen, and grabbed a big knife. I went into my room to check the closet, and when I opened the door, there was nothing there, except clothes hangers violently swinging back and forth. For reference, I lived in this apartment for over 3 years, so there are many things that happened over that span of time. Another night, I wanted to go and spend a couple of hours with friends because my brother and his girlfriend were staying at mine. So they'd be there if my daughter needed anything. I put her to bed and went out. When I came back around midnight, my little brother said, okay, I finally believe you. This house is really haunted. He was a hardcore skeptic until that night. Their room was right next to my daughter's, so they shared a wall. He said they were lying in bed and heard humming. Assuming my daughter had woken up, they went to check, and she was completely asleep in her crib. He said it happened 3 times while I was gone, including one time it sounded like she was humming and playing with her toys. But when they checked, she was still fast asleep. Part 3. My daughter's father had her for the weekend. So one night, I went out and I didn't get home until around 5 a.m, as one does when they're young. I lay down to go to bed and was punched in the back of my head, full force. Like so hard, my chin almost touched my chest. Not only did it leave me with a massive headache, but my neck was sore for the next 2 days afterwards. Part 4. Lastly, my daughter's room was located between mine and my brother's. Her bedroom door made a popping sound when it was open. I would hear her wake up in the middle of the night and start screaming her little heart out. Then I'd hear her door pop, as though it had been opened. I ran to check on her. I would turn from my door to hers and pass something the size of a small child in my hallway. Thinking my daughter, who was about 2 at this point, had climbed out of her crib and was coming to find me, I would turn on the hall light to let her know I was there and she was safe. But it wasn't her. There was nobody there. I get to her crib and she'll be screaming, not just crying, but fully terrified screaming and trying to climb out of her crib to get me. This happened at least a few times a week. Something in that room woke her up and tormented her regularly. When my brother and his girlfriend moved out, I switched her room to theirs, and she never had this issue. I later found out a man killed his girlfriend and child in my complex. I'll always believe a child wanted to play with my daughter, and the mother hated me for being in the master bedroom, her bedroom. I could keep going, but this has already turned into a novel, so I'll end it here. Thanks for reading and keeping an open mind. Have a wonderful day. There's something so scary about thinking a ghost or anything could harm your child or your pet or something, you know? There's something really terrifying about that. And it's not like you can stop them because you can't see them. Ooh, I don't like that. It was a great story. Thank you for sending that in. These asshole ghosts that can't get over that someone else is living in their house. Okay, our next story is called The Fingernails. Ew, okay. I want to tell you something creepy that happened to me. I was, I think, like 9 years old and was taking a shower. I was facing the wall, and to my right was the curtain, and behind me and to my left were walls. Suddenly, I felt like long nails stabbed my left shoulder blade. I screamed because of the pain. Not because I was scared, because I thought that it was my eldest sister. She's got long ass nails. But then I pushed the curtain open and there was nobody. My mum came running to where I was and asked me what happened. She thought I fell or something. And I told her what happened to me, what I felt. She turned me around to inspect my back and got scared because there, right on the exact same spot where I felt the stab, were prints of fingernails. I was not bleeding, was just on the surface of the skin, like when you press some pressure but not enough as for causing damage, and it was still red. I told my mum that I thought it was my sister. But the thing is that my sister was not at home. She was at my grandma's. There, right fucking there, was when I felt scared, and my mum too. My mum was really used to this kind of supernatural shit, which I'm used to now. Then I put some clothes on, and my mum took me to my grandma's house to show my family my back and tell them what happened. I think one of my sisters even took a photo of my back. I don't know if they still have the photo though. It was like a decade ago. The marks lasted a whole night. After that, I got traumatized and made my mum be in the bathroom while I took showers for weeks. Yeah, I think I would be pretty traumatized too. I always have this fear, and I think someone, where did I read it? Or I saw it in a story somewhere. I can't remember. I always think when I'm in a shower, And it's not like all showers, not like those like step in, like the bath with a shower, but it's like the square like step in showers. I'm always like, when I have my back to the glass, if I need to have my back to the glass, or if like my eyes are shut, I'm always scared I'm going to open my eyes and see something. I don't know what it is about showers. Just kind of, they're a little bit creepy. I mean, they're not meant to be, but they are. So I was going for bridal, but we've gone like a lot more than that for some reason. I can't seem to help myself. So this story is called It's Okay, Baby. Oh, this just sounds creepy. All right. In 2011, my husband, myself, and our 2 young boys, only one 4 months old, left our home in Kansas for North Carolina, where my husband had taken a job. We still owned a home in Kansas, so my parents moved into the home for us while we were gone. While California was beautiful, we missed our family home and moved back 1 year later. The old mining town in Kansas where we lived is rich with history, and many of the 100-plus-year-old buildings still stand. Our first night back home, I had the most realistic and terrifying dream that I had ever had in my life. I dreamt that something or someone was hurting my now 1.5-year-old toddler sleeping in his crib in the room next to me. His crying in my dream was so terrifying and gut-wrenching that I woke and went to his room and brought him to bed with me. A few nights later, my baby began to cry. He was a very fussy baby and often cried at bedtime. My husband and I laid there for just a moment, and just as I was about to get up, I heard a soft whisper that said, "It's going to be okay, baby." I froze. After a few seconds, again, "It's okay, baby." I looked at my husband, terrified, and to my complete shock, he whispered, "Did you fucking hear that?" We both heard the whisper and shot out of bed to grab our baby. Our other son was not home, and we were the only people in the house. I re-encountered the horrible dream and story of the whispers to my mum the next day. She had a knowing look on her face that confused me. She then told me that for almost the entire year that her and my dad had lived in that house while we were gone, they had experienced whispers and cabinets and doors closing on their own. She said that she didn't want to scare us, so she never said anything. We never had anything else significant happen to us, but I have no doubt that a ghost was comforting my baby that night. I mean, I'd rather they just left my family alone. Wouldn't you? How would you feel if your parents knew your house was haunted, but they didn't tell you because they didn't want to, like, scare you or upset you? I'd be like, I wish you told me so I could move out. That is terrifying. Whispers, ghosts whispering. Yeah, I don't like that at all. Great story though, thank you. That was terrifying, just how we like it. Okay, our next story, The Watcher. Hello Robert, hi. I absolutely love your content. I was also super excited to see you doing ghost stories because I love Mystery and Makeup Mondays with Bailey, me too. So I live in this small old logging town in Washington State. We have this old shut down mental hospital called North State Mental Hospital. Psychiatric hospital, I think they're called now. If you Google it, there are loads of articles about it since it's like the only interesting thing around here. Lots of people like to go and explore it. Some people like to go during the day. But my friends and I thought it would be fun to go at night, even though we have heard stories about something called The Watcher. People aren't sure if it's a skinwalker or something like that. And there are a few other stories people have told me that they have seen there. Just to give you some background information, hundreds of people died there, and they all lay in a giant field with one big sign, since there are no grave markers, which I think is very sad. Yeah. I've been told that you can just say someone was crazy and pop them in there. My grandfather says that we had a family member in there whose sister wanted his inheritance. Even before they really started to enforce the curfew at the grounds, there were specific places that had been boarded up to keep people out of them. My friends and I went around dusk and started to walk towards what we thought was the barns. We ended up in the crematorium. Then we finally made it to the barns and had a fun time exploring. We decided to take a random path to the forest area. Random paths are always a great choice. Once we got there, everything was going fine. But suddenly, we started to hear the sound of howling. But it slowly got closer and closer. So we decided it was time to go home. As soon as we had decided that we wanted to walk home, we kept hearing things breaking around us, like branches and twigs. We all stayed very close together and held our hands tight while flashing our lights around us like crazy people. One of my friends and I swear we saw something very tall and slim walking out of the bushes as soon as the sound of our coyotes stopped howling abruptly. To this day, I won't go at night because it freaks me out too much. There are some photos of the night we went out there. One is of a tree that I really felt like I needed to photograph. The next is from right before it became too dark to see anything, then two from inside the crematorium. I feel like places like psychiatric hospitals and things like that, I think they must have so much negative energy in there, especially older ones where the patients were insanely mistreated and, you know, it wasn't so much that they were being cared for, it was more like they were being kept there, you know. I feel like there must be some horrible memories in those places. Thank you so much for your story. Listen, guys, why go exploring at night? Actually, I would totally do that. But maybe with some guidance, you know, from somebody who works there. I would absolutely love to do a ghost tour one day, but I don't want to go on a ghost tour where it's just like people saying scary things and then jumping out at you dressed as Jack the Ripper. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to go on a proper, like, stay overnight with some real ghost hunters. So I've been trying to hide it, but I have the hugest headache migraine situation going on. So I'm very, very happy to say I have a guest on today, so I can kind of take a step back and just listen to some lovely storytelling. Today we have the incredible Cara C, and she has, of course, a YouTube channel, very much beauty based, and recently she created an amazing hashtag, and it was the My Beauty Community hashtag, where people talk about their favorite creators and their favorite beauty influencers and things like that, and it's just a really nice way to discover new people and see that the whole community isn't actually a toxic community. And she has a ghost story of her own, so she is gonna take over from me just while I sort out the rest of my face and tell us a nice story. Okay, let's go.
Hey Robert, thank you so much for having me on your channel. I'm so excited to be here. I'm such a huge fan of yours. I love what you do on your channel. I love your sense of humor, how you can say so much by just raising an eyebrow, and we all know what it is that you're saying when you do that. Chef's kiss perfection. In honor of today's ghost stories and makeup, I am wearing my gigantic skeleton earrings, although this guy's getting a little fresh. He keeps like trying to dig into the dress there, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on this one. Anyways, what I want to share with you is a story regarding my daughter, and really this is the experience that converted me from a skeptic regarding spirits to a firm believer. And what's more, it also converted my husband, who was far more skeptical than even I was. Before we get into it though, I want to give just a little bit of background information just so that it makes a little bit more sense as we move forward. So when I was born, I went from the hospital to my grandparents' house where my bio mom lived. She stayed with us for probably the first 2, maybe 3 years of my life, and then she went on to do what it was that she needed to do for herself. I stayed with my grandparents. I always lived with them. They raised me, and eventually they adopted me. So the people that I refer to as my mother and my father, biologically, they are my maternal grandparents. My bio dad, I have never met him. Fun fact, it turns out we actually live in the same city by some series of coincidence, but I really have no interest in meeting him. He's never played a role in my life. I had a father figure. So the person that I call my father was biologically my grandfather. My father was an incredible man. He never spoke a harsh word to me. He was always gentle with me. He always knew how to make me laugh. He was one of those people that could walk into a room of strangers and make friends with everybody. He's just so generous and gentle and just a wonderful person. And he loved children. He never treated myself and my cousins, who were basically the same age as me, he never treated us like pests to be tolerated. He was like on the ground playing with us. He just thrived on making children laugh. He played Santa whenever we had like community events at Christmas time, and he was just an incredible man. And on Christmas Eve of 2002, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In July of 2003, he passed away. And one of the biggest regrets that I had moving forward was he was never going to be at my wedding. I wasn't going to get to dance with him, and he'd never meet my children. Now, I have 2 children. My daughter Aspen was born in May of 2012, and my son Bennett was born in April of 2017. This story largely relates to my daughter Aspen. So a little bit of background information about my daughter, and I'm going to try very hard not to brag too much, but she is an incredible kid. She just turned 8, and she's an old soul. She is so caring and so loving and so concerned about other people. She is incredibly empathetic and sensitive, and her teachers have commented on that since the time she started junior kindergarten. She's even won awards for her empathy because she's always concerned about her classmates and even about her teachers themselves. She's just the sweetest child I have ever met. So my daughter is incredibly empathetic, as I said, and I think that may have been what played into what I'm about to describe. So Christmas Day, when my daughter was a little over 18 months old, I had taken her upstairs to my bedroom just to get her changed and ready for a nap, or I don't even remember at this point, but I took her up to our room for whatever reason, and my mother-in-law had come with me. And we were just chit-chatting, and Aspen was on my bed, and all of a sudden she stops. And she looks up in the corner of our bedroom over beside our window, up at the ceiling, and she just waves at it and says, "Hi, Papa," and then turns back around and continues playing with us. And my mother-in-law, big coward that she is, was just like, "Right, I'll be downstairs then." And out she went. She just noped out of that situation and just left me there. And I just figured, that's weird, but okay, we'll roll with it. Whatever, no big deal. But then it kept happening. So we would be in our room, and at that time we just, like I said, only had my daughter at that point. And so my husband and I would be on our bed, and our daughter was with us, and we'd be reading her books and getting ready for bedtime, things like that. And one night in particular, I remember she looked over at the corner again, and her looking at the corner and saying, "Hi, Papa," by this point had sort of become standard fare. She did it quite frequently, but that was about the extent of the interaction. On this night, she looked in the corner, said, "Hi, Papa," and then reached towards it and like pretended to tickle. And at that time, her language wasn't fantastic, but she would say like, "Ticka, ticka, ticka," if she was being tickled or if she was tickling somebody, and we would just pretend. So that's the sound that she made as she's reaching towards the corner. It was like this ticka, ticka, ticka sound. And then she'd stop. And then she'd start giggling and sort of close in on herself and hold her stomach as though she was being tickled and she was laughing. And this would go on for a few minutes. And my husband and I were just like, what is this? Because she wasn't at the age where she had imaginary friends or where she would be trying to like pull one over on her parents or anything of that sort. This was her interacting with something. And so we kind of took a little bit more note of it at that point. And I can't remember all of the exact details and how it all evolved, but I do remember the night that I decided we needed to do something about this. Again, I was on the bed with Aspen. We had time when we only had one child to like read the books and do the whole bedtime routine. That changes after child number 2. That's not the point of this story. But at this time, we had time for this like winding down of the day. So I was on the bed with her, and my husband was maybe putting laundry away. I remember he was standing off to the side. He wasn't on the bed, but he was in the room. And Aspen, again, looked over into the corner, and she said, "Hi, Papa." And then she kind of rolled back in towards me. So we were lying like face to face. And she kind of hid her head and hid her face a little bit. And then she'd kind of look and peek back over her shoulder into that general area and then turn and hide her face again. And that's sort of the same kind of motion that she would do anytime she was shy. If I took her to my office or whatever the case may be, and she wasn't comfortable with the people, she would hide her head and just bury herself into me. And so I could see that she was becoming upset. Not crying per se, but just uncomfortable. And I could really pick that up from her just in her body language and how she was like barely looking into the corner. And I said, honey, are you okay? I said, do you see Papa? Is Papa here? And she, yes. And she said, and she counted, and I can't remember how high she could count at that point. It wasn't, like 20 or 30, but maybe 7 or 8. And she was moving her finger along the length of our wall as she was counting. And that was the first time that I was scared by this, because I thought, if she has been consistently interacting with Papa, and now she's agitated and she's counting out other spots, what is she seeing? And who is in my bedroom? So I have a friend who, I don't know that she would call herself a medium, but for lack of a better word, that's the terminology that I'm going to use. She is a medium. She has helped spirits cross over in the past, and she has talked to me about that in the past. So I reached out to her and said, here's what's going on. What do you think? And her immediate response was, I think I'd like to come over and just spend some time in your room. I was like, how does tomorrow work for you? So we set it up, and she came over and just did what she does. I don't know how to do what she does, but she was just very quiet for a moment and just, I guess, reading the room, for lack of a better explanation. And she told me stuff. She said, I see a man and he's showing me his hands, and he's kind of like rubbing them and then showing them to me. And I mean, the skeptic that lives within my soul would say, well, I mean, you can interpret that and make it fit whatever narrative you want to, but be that as it may, for me, one of the things that I always remember about my dad was his hands. Because anytime he would leave a room and walk by me, he would give me like a little squeeze on the shoulder, or, if he was saying goodnight to me, he'd put his hand on my cheek, and his hands were always rough and calloused. He played guitar, he was an iron worker, so he worked with his hands. So to me, when she explained that, it was my dad just showing me his hands and basically verifying that it was him. And so we went on. There was more detail, but I can't remember everything right now, and I don't want to make it up. So she told me, what I think is happening and why Aspen was getting so agitated was because when spirits can sense that somebody can interact with them or see them, then they get very excited and they want to meet that person because they want to interact with them. And they're not necessarily invited and they're not necessarily related. They're just spirits who are aware that somebody can interact with them. And so she gave us some tips and ideas on how to kind of shut that portal, for lack of a better word, down. And so I thought, somewhere along the lines, and perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier, but regardless, it fits in here. At some point along this particular journey, I had brought out a picture of my dad, and I don't have a lot of pictures of him. I grew up before the age of, instant pictures on our phones and all that kind of thing, that we had to take our film to the store and get it developed. That's how old I am. So I do have some pictures of him in like a box that I keep. It's a memory box with some of his personal items and whatnot. And so I thought, I wonder what she would do if I showed her this picture, because she'd never seen it. So I brought the picture out, and immediately she lit up, and she had a big smile on her face, and she just said, Papa, like pointed at the picture. And in that moment, the sense of comfort that I had, like, it wasn't scary to me at all that she was seeing my dad. It was my dad, and he loved children, and it just brought me so much comfort knowing that in some way that I couldn't fully understand, my daughter was getting the opportunity to meet this man who'd had such a wonderful impact on my life. And so this went on for, I would say, at least the better part of a year. And it wasn't every day, but it was fairly consistent. And then at some point I realized that it hadn't happened in quite some time. So I asked her, I said, Aspen, do you still see Papa? And she said, yes, and that man. And I said, what? I'm sorry, who? What's that man? Who's that man? And she said, she kind of pointed and she said, Thomas. And I almost died. And here's why. So remembering that my father is actually my grandfather, he had a son, so my uncle, biologically. And his name was Thomas. Thomas died of a brain aneurysm. He died very suddenly when he was 37 in 1991. So the fact that my daughter came out with the name Thomas, where the only frame of reference for the name Thomas she would have had is that bloody tank engine, it blew my mind, because it's not a name that she would have just made up. It wasn't anybody that I'd ever talked to her about, because it was just so far removed that it had never occurred to me to speak with her about him. Yes, English. And I'd never shown her pictures. We don't have pictures of him up in my house. So it just, it further cemented for me that this was real, because she wouldn't have just come up with that name. My husband and I never made a big deal of it with her. We never told her she was just imagining things. We just sort of let it ride and we let it run its course. And then we never really thought about it all that much after that, until my son was about a year old. So Bennett, again, born in 2017, so he's almost 5 years exactly younger than his sister. When he was about a year old, there was one night where he would not sleep. Well, you know what? There's a lot of nights that Bennett won't sleep, even now. He's 3 years old, and that kid, I swear he thinks sleep is for the weak. I don't know. But he would not sleep that night. So my husband went downstairs to try to sleep on the couch, and I brought Bennett into bed with me, and he kept looking over his shoulder into the same corner where Aspen first saw Papa, and he was waving at it, and he was saying hi. But he kept doing that. He kept looking into the corner, waving, and saying hi. And at that point, I was like beyond exhausted. And I just said, not the time, Dad, not the time. Get out. And Bennett never waved at the corner again. And I regret saying that, because maybe doing that, I kicked his spirit out somehow. And I don't know how to get him back. So seeing the two of them interact with the same area of my house, with the same interest and delight in what they were seeing, I believe that spirits are true and real. I cannot be convinced otherwise. And that is the story of my children seeing my father's spirit. So thank you so much, Robert, for letting me share that with you and with your audience. It's an honor to be here. I'm so happy, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you very much. And as I always say on my channel, be a decent human being. Bye for now.
Oh. Not sure why that made me really emotional. That was amazing. What an incredible story. And it's, when things like that happen at you, it's kind of hard to argue any other way, you know? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for being on my channel, and thank you for sharing that incredible story. I'll link Kara's channel below so you can all go and check it out. What an amazing storyteller as well. That was incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. This is my what was meant to be basic bridal turned into like a brownie smoky eye with a bit of rose gold. If you have any stories, any paranormal stories, ghosts, aliens, weird people, just send them to this email here and I will read them out here on Mondays. I'm currently reading stories from April now, so I'm very far behind, but do keep them coming and they'll be on here eventually. Have an amazing week ahead, have an amazing day. I know for some of you it's Tuesday, so have an amazing Tuesday, and I will see you very soon. Bye.